ऐगिरिनन्दिनि नन्दितमेधिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दनुते गिरिवरविन्ध्यशिरोधिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते.
Namaskaram. Welcome to my guest. I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Maya Ram, and her journey out of Christianity into Hinduism is a very inspiring one because it comes from self-discovery. Living in a far-off land where she was amongst the Christians for most part of her life, and how she found her way out of Christianity into the religion of her ancestors. It's a very exciting journey, and I would ask her to just give us a brief overview of how it started. And we will do this show in two parts. I'm going to start off from the part of um, her her getting baptized into Christianity and how that was a breaking point of her family being broken into pieces. And I'm going to stop at that. In the next part, I'm going to talk about what it took to be raised by pretty much a single mother who took control of Maya's life. And the last part, I will talk about how she found her way out of the clutches of Christianity, and Christianity that used her mother as a pawn to kind of create a lot of confusion and strife in that family. All right, Maya. So if you can just give us a brief overview of what kind of family you were raised in.
So I was born in the U.S. to two parents from India originally. My father, his family is originally from Andhra Pradesh, though he was raised in Chennai for most of his life. My mother's side, they are from Uttar Pradesh, though my mother spent her teenage years in Chennai. That's actually where my parents met. My father's side is the Telugu Brahmin, and my mother's side is Christian. Although oddly enough, she herself was raised in a mixed religion household, with her mother being Christian, my grandmother, and her father being Hindu until towards the end of his life. He didn't actually convert until then. He was a Paligat Iyer. As far as when my mother's family converted, they say the family story goes that it was during the British times. You see, my family were actually zamindars. They were not, I know the trope is that only the poor convert, but that's not quite the case. My family, they were zamindaris, and they still did, converted by either British or American missionaries, but it was during British rule.
Can I say that is it because a part of people converted to Christianity from what we call as good backgrounds, right? And is it because they wanted to be part of some kind of an elite group that Britishers projected themselves as?
I know my great-grandfather, my Parnana, he was indeed in the civil service. So that could have been part of it. And I think before him, his father had also entered the British civil service. That was around the time that the family converted. My Parnana came from a Muslim background, oddly enough, whereas my Parnani came from a Hindu background.
So it is really a mixed family.
Yes, actually, yeah, quite a unique background. You can only get that in India.
That is true. That is true. So from coming from such a varied backgrounds, what made your mother? Of course, she didn't have a problem marrying a Hindu. That's what I gather, right?
Right.
But
yes.
When did the problem start that she didn't find herself happy in this marriage, or where she felt the need that she has to completely take on the Christian identity and raise her children as Christians? Like, at what point? Obviously, she didn't have these reservations. If she had the reservations about about Hindus, she would not have married a Hindu man, but she did.
Right.
So, at what point do you think was the pressure from outside the family, or is it internal? So, what exactly happened? What did you observe as a child?
From what I observed as a child, I know my nani, because I didn't know my nana. My nani especially was quite more of a cultural Christian really. She wasn't really a fundamentalist, very ardent Christian. She was fine with whatever, but she gave a lot of freedom to both my mother and my Masi. My mother has a younger sister. And I never observed any pressure for even my brother and I to convert, at least when I was younger. I think this pressure came, I think my mother wanted to take on more of the Christian identity as she got older and ran into some strife that either was created by her or she felt was coming from external forces. As far as when my parents' marriage started to disintegrate, I didn't notice too much growing up when we still lived in the U.S. See, I was born in the U.S. and lived there until I was 7 when my family decided to move back entirely. I was 7, my brother was 4. My father wanted to join my tata's business. They had a telecommunications business. And she was definitely not happy with that. That probably was a turning point in her dissatisfaction. And I certainly know that was a turning point in my parents' marriage when they were constantly arguing. She was angry all the time. I also remember she took out a lot of her anger on both my brother and I with unusually harsh discipline for the smallest of infractions. We spent about 5 years there. We lived in Chennai. And then eventually we moved back to the United States. And it was around that time she started to get serious about finding a church, I suppose because she felt some unhappiness in her life. And eventually she did.
Let me ask you let us see. So till you all moved back to India, it didn't seem like they had any trouble.
No, not really. No, and
Not
she
really. So
no.
Till that time, like till about 7 years old, while you were in India, did you have any kind of religious functions or any kind of religious things going on in your home?
No, neither parent really raised us in any tradition. We didn't go to church. We didn't go to the mandir. The most we would do was celebrate Diwali with the local Indian American Association or something or the other, celebrating the aspects of Diwali that are celebrated by everyone, lighting diyas. And in these Indian American associations, they usually have like music programs or stuff like that.
The reason I ask you this is because, as you know, I myself am in a mixed marriage. I married a Hindu man.
Right.
So, in some sense, I'm in your mother's shoes. So there is a lot of conflict as a Christian raised in a Christian household when you have to suddenly get exposed to this. Not suddenly, but when you have been terrified about this Murti puja and things like that, and you know that yes, your husband is a good man and he's going to take care of you and things like that, but that aspect of celebrating Hinduism with him or being part of this Hindu rituals is still it's a very difficult thing, because it is not that I don't think it is not just that you are submitting to his ways and things like that, but it is about you are actually committing a sin by being part of idol worship, right? So at that point, you have now taken a position of, I'm committing a sin against God if I am happily celebrating these things with my husband. So did you see any kind of conflict like that in your mother's thing, where she did it because yes, she wants to keep her family happy, but at the same time she had this conflict that what I'm doing is actually against my God or against my religion or against my faith, and having that conflict? Did you ever see that in her?
I remember she told me that when my parents married, that my tata and nainama, probably the most devout Hindus that I know from my father's side, they strongly insisted on a Hindu wedding with Andhra rites. And she held resentment for a very long time about that. She told me that when I was relatively young. And then also there was one incident when we moved back to India. At this point now we were closer to our tata, to my brother and I were closer to our tata and nainama. And my nainama started introducing us to Hindu worship, doing puja to the various murtis in her shrine. And and as you know, being from Andhra, Ganesh Chaturthi is a very big festival for Telugu people. And she had us take part in festivities for Ganesh Chaturthi. And when my mother found out, she was absolutely livid. Even though she never forced us to go to church, she was still absolutely livid that we were doing this. Yes, I understand. Yes, this idol worship is definitely one of the biggest sins a Christian can commit. It's in the 10 Commandments, after all.
It is kind of very funny to even acknowledge this thing in an open platform, right? I didn't have a problem marrying a Hindu, but anything to do with my children taking on the identity of being a Hindu hurt me in some sense. And it's a very irrational fear. It is a very irrational thing because obviously I knew I was marrying a Hindu, right? But it would bother me. It would bother me in several levels. One of them, the most important thing for me personally was my family might not accept my children if they see them in that Hindu form,
Right.
in that Hindu imagery. So it's almost like, even though I kind of culturally took to Hinduism in the sense that I celebrated the festival, I did everything that was the cultural part of it. So even when we took pictures, I would kind of censor the pictures where we had any kind of Hindu murtis and any kind of anything that kind of shows that now I have taken on this Hindu identity. So for me to come out like this with Buddha has taken a lot of struggle. So I'm able to visualize this. But let me go back to your moving to India. So when you move to India,
yeah,
there is a misconception that the husband side of the family tries to take control, and in that conflict between her wanting to keep her identity and her in-laws trying to impose their things, was there anything that you have seen that from your father's side, was there any pressure on you all to act a certain way?
Was there any pressure for us to convert to Hinduism?
Mm-hmm.
No, there. Other than my nainama introducing us to Murti Puja and to Ganesh Chaturthi. After my mother was put her foot down, absolutely not. I don't think they would have pressured me anyway, because maybe they wanted us to be Hindu officially, but or maybe they just wanted to keep the peace between in my parents' marriage and not interfere, cause any conflict between my dad and my mom, and to also keep a relationship with us. And I think they genuinely strived to have a good relationship with my mother.
Okay, but
she didn't reciprocate.
She never could get into terms with having a happy relationship with the parents-in-law. You didn't see her being happy. But most of her,
not at all.
So most of her resentment with her in-laws, did it come because of her religious leanings, or did it happen because of personality conflict?
I think primarily it was personality conflict. She was very strong-willed, and then I think that a lot of it was that, and I'm not sure where exactly she clashed with my nainama. Maybe my nainama was pressuring her to be a good Hindu house bahu and just play the part, especially publicly. Maybe there was that, but I don't know for sure. I'll never really know. I know my mother's perception is quite skewed.
Okay. And so you all moved back to the US again.
Yes.
After how many ever years? So what happened after, like, till then, it did seem like the first 7 years while you were in the US, you didn't have any kind of religious pressure. So you were neither Christian or a Hindu, this kind of
No.
stayed neutral. And then you
Yep.
went to India and you got a little bit of exposure to Hinduism there. But then that also was kind of shot down because of the reservations your mother had.
Yes.
And can I make a fair assumption that till the point that you were still in India, you really didn't have any direct experience or a direct interaction with any kind of organized Christian groups? Or did you have any
Um,
interaction with them?
the closest interaction I had with any organized Christian groups was my Masi. She was affiliated with Youth with a Mission for a very long time. Um, she was big on that. She was also she and my uncle, they also ran an orphanage school for a long time, and they had started that when my family had moved back. Uh, so I was exposed to not necessarily church, but they would often have impromptu worship services, lots of music, and they always had these children's Christian videos on. I don't know if you've heard of Salty. They always had that, and then I was also given a children's Bible for both my brother and I. It had sanitized versions of Bible stories, like Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the story of David and Goliath, and of course the Jesus story and all that. That was the closest I got. We did one time host a Youth with the missionary that had come from Denmark, but other than that, no official church membership or affiliation.
Okay. So while in India, you really didn't even have any kind of attempt from your mother's side to neutralize your Hindu influence. While in India, she couldn't do it. Am I right?
No, no, and I think she must have feared that my my dad would divorce her in India and she'd have less rights.
Okay. All right. So then you moved back to the US. So when did
Yes.
becoming part of a group, a Christian group, become important for your mother?
It took about a year of searching for a church that was right for her when she finally settled on the denomination she wanted to be a part of, the Seventh-day Adventists. Uh, it was around the year 2000 that she started to seriously explore the Seventh-day Adventist theology. They're very apocalyptic in nature. They believe the end of the world is imminent, and they always hold these sessions where they talk about the book of Daniel and book of Revelation, prophecy of end times coming. And I think that might have resonated with her, as it does with a lot of people. Keep in mind, 2000 was also the year of Y2K, and they thought the world was going to come to an end. But it hasn't, obviously. And also her personal unhappiness might have driven her to the Seventh-day Adventists. They provide easy answers. I'd say they're one of the best at marketing these easy answers for vulnerable people.
So once she got introduced to the Seventh-day Adventists, so now it is not just her being a Christian, but now she has an organized group behind her.
Yes.
Right. So whenever she became part of this group, in some sense, she felt empowered to take on this battle against her children being influenced by Hinduism in India or wherever that is. So did you feel like that organization provided her the wherewithal to kind of fight this huge battle that she's having in the family, where there seems to be some kind of an attempt to turn the children away to Hinduism?
At the time, not so much, because we were far away from them. And at that point, she did not allow us to visit my grandparents that easily. And it was just very rare visits after that. And I'd say, though, that she might have still had this fear that we would be unsaved in her mind, which is how it came up later when when she got deeper and started taking us to a local Seventh-day Adventist church a couple of years after she first learned of them.
Okay. What I'm trying to get at is, till the time that you all were living in the US, she never had the fear that you would turn into a Hindu, because you were
Right.
never even exposed to that.
Right.
The next 5 years, when you moved to India, you kind of got exposed to a certain aspect of Hinduism, probably the festivities and the fun aspect and all those things. And as children, they like that. My own children used to enjoy that more than going to the church whenever I took them. Whenever my parents were here, that's when I used to take them. So that insecurity that the children might eventually go that path or explore that path, that became pronounced only after you moved to India. Okay?
Right.
So when she came back, that must be the thing that must be working on her mind, that now that these children have tasted a little bit of Hinduism, there is a possibility that they might actually completely take that path. And I need to neutralize it. And I cannot neutralize it just by being an individual Christian, but I need an organization behind me. Or I need to have a group of people that have to support this cause. So is that your reading, that that's the reason she went into this organized part that she was not part of before? Obviously, she never thought of becoming a member of a church or anything like that till then. But it is her insecurity that you will all be taken over by Hinduism that pushed her to become part of an organized church.
When you put it that way, it makes sense. That's could have been the driving reason for her to push us to get baptized. That certainly is a good reason. Even though, come to think of it, she really had no fear living in the U.S. Even so, we had moved back to North Carolina. And then a year later, we moved to California, which is actually where she found this church. Yes, many people may not know this, but California has a lot of Indians. But even so, there's still not that strong exposure to Hinduism, to be honest, even in a place like California. But that could have been in the back of her mind. I'll never quite know for sure. I think a lot of it came down to control as much as it was her feeling that she needed to fulfill her duties as a Christian.
So in all this, what was the role your dad played? On one hand, trying to keep the family together, keep the wife happy, and at the same time not knowing, not having anything against Hinduism, because obviously he's a Hindu and he didn't find anything wrong with your doing puja with your grandparents. So what role did he play? What kind of a position did he take in all these things?
With I noticed he would often try to avoid these conflicts, and often he would take business trips and go away for long periods of time, and he would leave it to my mother and my grandmother to hash it out. He didn't want to get involved. And unfortunately, that avoidance also played into the ever-increasing conflict between my parents. And in an effort to save the marriage, that's why we moved back. That's a big part of why we moved back to the US.
So in all these things, he just passively watched, because you just mentioned that you went as far as baptism. That takes a lot.
Yes.
So
yeah.
At what point did you become such an integral part of the church that the church decided to baptize you all?
So 2 years after my mother found out about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, she settled on a church to attend. And about a year after, my brother and I also started going, because she made us. And it was a year after all three of us were attending regularly, that she decided she wanted both of my brother and I to get baptized. I remember that day quite clearly. I remember the pastor came to talk to both of us and wanted to make sure that we were consenting to getting baptized. We were making that decision on our own. And he also wanted to talk to my dad, who he knew that he was a Hindu, he had not converted. And my dad raised strong objections to us getting baptized, and told the pastor that we were only going to say yes because our, because our mother was in the same room. And she told us before the pastor came that if we did not get baptized, she would no longer have a relationship with us anymore. And he did try, but most of the time, all he could do was watch. But still, it was some more time after that marriage finally broke apart.
Okay, so this baptism was almost like something. Was it sneaked upon, or was it well planned about? Did you see your parents discuss this, or your mother didn't even feel the need to discuss this with your father?
No, not at all. And he was one that you can do whatever you want, just to keep her happy. Do whatever you want. So he didn't object when she was going to church at first on her own, then started taking us.
Did he make an attempt to find out from you all if you're all happy doing this?
Maybe he wanted to, but to keep the peace in the house, he didn't ask us anything, because inevitably, because my mother would compel us to tell her every interaction that we had with our dad, and this was well before they eventually divorced. She was already behaving like he was outside the house, that he was some outsider. And we would have told her, and she would have started an argument with him. So I'm guessing he knew that for sure. So I'm guessing that's why he didn't ask us.
I'm going to ask you a very difficult question.
Sure.
All of this happened while she was completely financially dependent on him. Am I right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So that means here was a woman who was not afraid that her source of very survival is going to be taken away if she antagonized this person so badly. That means she took advantage of some goodness in him that is going to make him take care of the family, take care of the children, take care of her, while she is trying to create a conflict in the family, turning the children against her own father.
Yeah. Yes, my father is a very decent man at heart, and I've heard a lot of people say he was a bit too passive, but I don't want to say that. That's just him. He just didn't know quite how to deal with her, I guess.
See, this story resonates with me so much. The reason it does is, of course, I was financially, I cannot say I'm financially independent, but I started working as soon as we moved to the US in a few years. And the reason it resonates with me is, here was a man, my husband joined with me in a lot of things that I have done for my own family, my parents. And he has, for the most part, financially supported my family. It's not because my father was not earning, but once we got married, I decided to bring one of my brothers to come and study in the US to do his master's. And I could not do this on my own salary. We had to collectively earn money to support them, and we bought them back home. We made sure that our parents had comfortable homes. So we did a lot of things as a couple to take care of my family needs. In fact, we didn't do so much for my husband's side of the family. It was my side of the family that I helped a lot. But they felt entitled to it. And they always, looking back now, because of once I kind of publicly confessed that I'm not a Christian anymore and I'm a Hindu, that's when they go back and question, like, oh, if you knew that you were going to get converted to Hinduism, we would never have accepted your help, kind of thing. We would have kept you away. I mean, that kind of it just amuses me to think about it, right? You knew all the while that your son-in-law was a Hindu, isn't it?
Right.
But you conveniently thought that, oh, my daughter is a Christian, that's why I'm going to take. I'm okay with being part of or being benefited by this by her marriage. So it almost, to me, it felt like they thought it was their right. that
Yeah.
in some sense, right? Because, oh, my daughter is still a Christian, so what? If it's almost like I'm stealing from my husband and providing for you, but it was still, you knew it all the while, but in your mind you thought that you were entitled to it because your daughter obviously is not a Hindu, she's still a Christian, or she didn't tell anybody that she's a Hindu, so it's okay, kind of thing, right? So
Right.
that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of seeing a similar pattern here,
Yeah.
where you're financially dependent on this man, okay, and he's helping you, he's providing all that you had from the time you got married, but
Yeah.
still in your mind you felt like you never felt that fear that he's going to abandon you, or he's going to just leave you in the lurch.
Right.
So the value system that he had is what kept the family together in some sense, isn't it?
You know, kind of looking back in retrospect, yes. It's funny. She would always claim that she was the one that kept the family together. She was the one that got us to move back to the US. And she was the one that eventually got my father to take a better paying job in California so we could buy a quite a big house. It was quite a big house. And in actuality, it was his hard work and it was his misplaced notion that we were better off together as a family rather than, separated and us kids going between two households at the same time. I get it. Divorce is very hard on children, and even the marriage was just as hard as a divorce would be, to be honest. But it was him. It was him after all.
So generally, especially in Indian families, not even Indian families, in general, it is very easy for a mother to act as a victim, to kind of take children on her side, okay, even though it is she who's actually part of the confusion.
Right.
It is she who brought a complete strange community into the family to take control of her children, right? Like,
yes,
taking baptism is not a small thing. It is a complete surrender of identity to a completely different group of people. And as a parent, it would break your heart that you don't even know with whom your children are interacting, because
right.
that world is completely cut out from your father. He doesn't know what is happening to his children once they leave the house and go, and what kind of games they're playing, what kind of exploitation they're doing, what kind of trauma the children are going to. Because as a parent, he doesn't even know what happens outside uh, when you're part of that group, right?
Yeah.
But even then, still he got to be the victim. He got to be the one who was projected as the difficult one, or the one who was not caring enough.
Right.
So, did he ever kind of talk about these things to you all as children? Did he make an attempt?
He, when we were young, definitely not. As we got older, my brother and I, into our teen years, this was around the time we also got baptized. He tried to talk to us about his newfound spirituality. You see, much of his life he was rather indifferent. He said he even identified as atheist at one point. But around the time we came back, moved to California, he embraced what's called this is called passage meditation. This was started by one Eknath Easwaran, who is originally from Kerala. So basically, you take a passage from any scripture, from any tradition actually, and you meditate on that, and then chant a mantra that you can actually that you are either you choose, or one that you might have originally been initiated with if you were as a child. He tried to talk about this with us as a tried to offer an alternative. I remember he gave my brother one of the passages that is frequently meditated on, the prayer of Saint Francis. Now that is Catholic, as well Christian. However, when my mother found out, she too, which she was still livid about that. You also have to know that the Seventh-day Adventist denomination is strongly anti-Catholic. They're one of the only Protestant denominations to be anti-Catholic to this day. They believe that the Antichrist will come from the Vatican. Actually, it's rather funny.
So this is just okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So your father's taking on this meditation and all. Can it be seen as some kind of coping technique that he himself had to look to with what has been happening in the home front?
Oh, certainly. Yes, I believe so. And I'd say it has served him quite well. He's been a practitioner for more than 20 years now.
Okay. So at what point, what do you think was the breaking point for your father to say that's enough and no more?
I think the baptism was a breaking point. He was trying to hang in there to at least both of my brother and I had finished high school and would enter college, which would be taken care of regardless. He was trying to keep the marriage together until then so that they can finally go their separate ways after we were out of the house and grown up enough. I think that was a breaking point. He must have mulled over it for a long time because it took a year and a half before he did eventually decide, enough, I'm going to file for divorce.
So the proposal to get a divorce came from your father and not your mother, or was it both ways?
It came from my father, though my mother threatened to file for years.
Oh, she always threatened.
Yeah.
On what grounds?
With anything, and this is California. There's no fault divorce, so it's very easy to get one, for any reason.
She was the one who took the minor children to get them baptized without the father's consent, but also happens to be the one who threatens divorce, because legally you cannot force a minor to do what she did, right? Because the father could have if your father wanted to go the legal way, he could have really sued the church that they are manipulating his minor children. Did your father ever contemplate that?
He never really said anything about if he was contemplating it, but you have to realize that this is unprecedented. I don't think anyone in the country has sued a church for taking their children and baptizing them against their consent. I don't think that's ever happened, and well, family courts tend to be in favor of the mother anyway, so maybe he knew that it would probably be a losing battle.
So even though she threatened to divorce him, but he called the bluff and he took the action himself. And when he left, what did you as children go through, and what is that your mother went through?
I can remember I was somewhat taken aback and surprised because I was just on the verge of graduating from high school. And then it certainly shook up the household, and I was distracted a lot for that final semester of high school. My brother took it very hard because he'd now have to split his time between two households because he was still well under 18. As for me, I would turn 18 and I would go to college, so I'd be in a little better shape. My mother, I remember, was more concerned about the financial aspect. She would, how would she, what would her income come from? How would she be able to sustain this massive house in California? So she was worried more about that.
And on the emotional side, on the psychological side, did she make use of this divorce to prove a point that here was a man who was not good, and that's why he abandoned you all, kind of thing? Did she take advantage of that situation to kind of solidify her claim that a Hindu man is not somebody who's kind and things like that?
Oh gosh, yes. Shortly after my dad filed for divorce and left the house, moved out, she had the pastor from our church come and talk to us because both my brother and I, of course, we were very emotionally distressed, as one can imagine a child would be when their parents divorce. And he talked to us and said, just forget about him. He was nothing more than a sperm donor. Never mind that he never left us throughout the years that he never left us when we were young, and he never really left us even when, as we grew up. He never abandoned us and tried to have a relationship with us. But at that time, our relationship, my brother and I's relationship with our dad, was very strained because we were taught not to have anything to do with him, a heathen. And for your viewers, you should know that heathen is pretty much the Christian equivalent of the word kafir in Islam. It's used in that same context. Yeah. So yes, that's the kind of, that's how she took advantage and brought in the pastor to do the same. And this, I've wanted to contact this pastor for a long time and let him know that what he did was wrong, and I'm not going to forgive him for it.
So here was a man whose children were taken away from him, and he was just helplessly watching it. And when he could not help the situation, he at least decided for his own peace to walk away from marriage and still provide another household for his children so that they can come and stay with him at least half of the time or whenever they chose to, right?
Right.
So in my mind, I'm thinking the divorce decision is not something where he selfishly walked away, but he wanted to create another atmosphere away from this mess where his children, if they choose, can come and live with him. But then he was the one who was demonized for the whole process.
Well, yes.
All right, we're going to continue what your life was after your dad left the house that he bought.
Right, that he bought.
And the house that he provided for his family, but he was the one to pack and leave. We'll see in the next episode what is it that the family went through once the breadwinner of the family was pushed out from his own house. And we'll continue with the next talk.